Here.
Representative Edwards. Representative O'Grady.
Here.
Representative Brigham. Representative Kaufman.
Here. Here.
Representative Almeida.
Here.
Representative Canario.
Here.
Representative Philippi.
Here.
Representative Knight.
Here.
Representative Shanley.
Here.
Representative Price.
Here.
Representative Roberts. Here.
Here.
Excellent. Welcome, everybody, to the first hearing of the Judiciary Committee that's televised. And we have some new faces here on the committee this year. We have Evan Shanley, who's new to the room. He's a practicing attorney from Warwick. Representative Jason Knight from Barrington and Warren, also new to the committee, also a practicing attorney. Welcome. We have Sherry Roberts from Coventry and West Greenwich, also new to the committee. Welcome, Sherry. Blake Flippy returns, representing 5 or 6 towns, including 4 towns. Block Island, Charleston, Richmond.
South Kingstown and West Greenwich.
South Kingstown. I will get that right, and hopefully next term. Representative Price is also new. You represent Richmond.
Exeter and a small portion of Hopkinton.
Richmond, Exeter, and a small portion of Hopkinton. Welcome to the committee. Returning is Representative O'Grady from Lincoln. New to the committee is Camille Vella Wilkinson from Warwick. Welcome.
Thank you, Chairman.
Longtime member of the House, Doc Corvese, makes his first appearance on the Judiciary Committee. Representative Corvese from North Providence. Welcome to the committee. Joe Almeida returns from the great city of Providence. Welcome, Joe. Whip Edwards is at another committee hearing. We have Dennis Canario from Tiverton and Little Compton. Vice chairing the committee this year is Representative Agello from the east side of Providence.
And Federal Hill.
And second vice chair this year is Carol Hagan McEntee. I got that right. Also a practicing attorney from Narragansett and South Kingston.
Yeah.
And David Coughlin from the great city of Pawtucket, also a practicing attorney, also making a return to the committee. So that is our committee this year, and today we have 4 marriage solemnization bills. Let's deal with those first.
Mr. Chairman, I move to bundle the 4 first bills on our calendar, all solemnization of marriage bills.
Vice Chair moves to bundle the marriage solemnization bills. That's seconded by
I'll second it.
Representative McEntee. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposition?
Mr. Chairman, I move that we pass that bundle of 4 solemnization of marriage bills.
Representative Agello moves passage. That's seconded by Representative McEntee. All in favor?
Aye.
Is there any opposition? Okay, our marriage solemnization bills have passed. We have 4 bills up for a vote today from our hearing last week. Let's take those one by one. First, we have House Resolution 5062 by Representative Regenberg.
Mr. Chairman, I move passage of House Bill 5062, extending the reporting deadline for Representative Regenberg's commission.
So, Vice Chair Agello moves passage. That's seconded by Representative McEntee. Is there any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposition? Okay, that passes. Let's next take up Representative McEntee's bill, House Bill 5098.
I move passage of this bill. We passed it in committee last year and on the floor, and I think it's a good bill, and I move passage.
Okay, Vice Chair McEntee moves passage.
Second.
That's seconded by Vice Chair Agello. Is there any discussion? Representative Price.
Yes, I guess one concern I have on this is, again, I was in here last year, and thanks for the thanks for the sign. Is that if it includes? I mean, it seems like it's including all electronic communication, which everything in our society now is going towards electronic and email conversation. Would that eliminate basically everything from public record because it's an electronic or other format? I guess that's my concern, because it'll just put everything in under an envelope of not being accessible to the Freedom of Information Act. Can anybody clear that up for me?
Is there any further discussion? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposition? Representative Filippi
Nay.
in opposition, Representative Price in opposition. And that bill passes. I'm sorry, and Representative Roberts also in opposition. Okay, so that bill passes. Let's next take up Representative Diaz's bill, House Bill 5101.
Mr. Chairman, move passage of 5101.
Okay, Vice Chair Agello moves passage of that bill.
Second?
That is seconded by Representative McEntee. Is there any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposition? Okay, that bill passes. And finally, we have my bill, House Bill 5116.
Mr. Chairman, move passage of 5116 as we did last year.
Vice Chair Agello moves passage. That's seconded
Second.
by Representative McEntee. Is there any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Okay, that bill passes. Next, we have 6 bills to hear.
Mr. Chairman, move to hold the remaining bills on our calendar for further study.
Vice Chair Agello moves to hold the remaining bills for further study.
Second?
That is seconded by Representative McEntee. All in favor?
Aye.
Is there any opposition? Okay, those bills will be held for further study. I see we have Representative Diaz here. Representative, let's begin with your bill, House Bill 5095.
Good afternoon, Chairman and members of the Judiciary Committee. The purpose of this bill is to make the field the same opportunity for the 3 types of employees that the state has. We have classified employees, unclassified, and non-classified. From those 3 groups, only the classified employees are not able to run. They prohibit to run for elective office. If you see the little picture I tried to put together here to illustrate maybe better what I'm saying, we have the classified employees, which include CNA, janitors, secretary, and the low pay wages in the scale or in the structure of government. And then we have the unclassified employees, which are the directors, the department directors, and college professors. They are allowed to run for elective office. It's not fair that some group of employees, they prohibit it, and others have the chance to do that. And I am the best example of that because in 2004, after working 8 years for the state, I had to resign even before I declare my candidacy to running for a state office. And in order to running for office, I had to do that. And at that point, I was very lucky that I ran my campaign. And after successful campaign and I won the election, I was able to represent my district. But it's not the case of many other people who decided to run for office. They resigned for the state job, and then they lost election, and they're not able to get the job back. They ended to lose the election and also don't have an opportunity to work. And to me, it's more the justice than anything else, because if a professor or my department director, my boss, is able to run, why me, as a CNA, as a secretary, is prohibited to work? What the bill does in this case is to try to make more, I would say, easy to understand and dealing with this by requesting that the person, the classified employees, is able to run, and then if they win the election, they will resign, not before. So that way we protect the family that they're able to keep the job instead to forcing them to resign before they run for office. So the bill is more easy, or I would say better draft this year, because it's helping people to have the same opportunity. And that is America, where everybody can dream and can afford to get the same thing. Please help me to pass the bill, because this year is just helping people to represent the community the way or they coming from. Thank you. If you have any question, I will refer it to Jim Signorini from ASME, because he's an expert working with me for around 13 years, Jim, around for this bill. And now we make it, now I would say, easy to manage in dealing with the bill and the idea to help everybody to run for office. If you have any question, I'm willing to answer.
Thank you, Representative Diaz. I believe Vice Chair Jello has a question.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Representative Diaz. Thank you. I understand the force of the legislation regarding classified employees running for office, but on lines 4 through 7, the law is talking about the Personnel Appeals Board, and it's saying that it is deleting in your legislation language that says that an elected officer of the state cannot be appointed to the Personnel Appeal Board.
Thank you for the question. I believe Jim will be more able to answer that question.
Okay.
And it's a part of the language that is managed by another session, so I will defer it to him the opportunity to answer your question. Especially, I don't have glasses with me. It's so shame. I live in my car and I can't even see you. So thank you, and I will ask the chairman, please call Jim to save me.
All right, let's hear from Jim Signorini from Council 94 and Stephen Brown from the ACLU.
Thank you so much, Chairman, members of the committee. Jim Signorini, Rhode Island Council 94. We represent over 4,000 state employees, 5,000 active municipal employees, and over 2,500 retirees. And I just would like to state off the cuff that Rep. Diaz has never needed rescuing. She described the bill very ably. To address first Rep. Agelo's question, I would just say that I think because this bill originally was designed just to allow classified state employees to run, that actually was compromise language that had been developed between us and the Department of Administration. And their point was, I think that they felt it would be moot because it simply says no member of the Personnel Appeal Board can even seek nomination or be a candidate for any elective office. So it's a declarative statement. So I believe that is, if you would like a sub-A that would restore that language to make the prohibition stronger, we certainly would be open to that, to move the legislation. Going back to the merits of the legislation, Rep. Diaz is exactly right. There is a huge inequity in the law. Out of the 3 types of employees, with classified employees being the vast majority of what Council 94 represents, are people who have generally written job descriptions, work in the different branches of government, whether they're plumbers, pipe fitters, secretaries, wetland biologists, it goes on and on and on. Unclassified employees are like deputy sheriffs who actually provide courtroom security. They work in the courts. They also, unclassified, are also people who work directly for the General Assembly. Non-classified are predominantly those employees who work under the Board of Governors of Higher Education at the 3 universities, generally in a professorial role or a confidential role. Where the inequity gets to, and just to script this out, is some of you may have been up here when Representative Rice served. I thought served well for many years here. He was a university professor. Representative Rice had the perfect right to be able to go ahead, file, and run for office, but a custodian, a clerical person, a plumber, a pipe fitter, an electrician cannot even file to run. They can't run. And to us, I would just point out to the committee that this is the only prohibition on the books that I am aware of that actually bars a specific type of employee from not being able to run. This even goes beyond the Hatch Act. This does not adversely impact the Hatch Act at all. So from our viewpoint, what we had always maintained is classified employees should be able to run. The bill actually moved through the Senate twice. We had received some pushback from people who said they had concerns about the legislation. So working with the now departed, and not departed in the sense, but he had left state service, Peter Dennehy, we had crafted this, what we thought was a reasonable compromise, so that a classified employee could at least run for office. And then if they win, they can make the decision to resign and serve. Again, we view it as a matter of basic equity. When you start playing it out, it can get somewhat ridiculous, where a deputy sheriff can run for office now under the law, but a Capitol Police who works in the same courthouse cannot. A secretary who may be a classified employee cannot run, but a secretary who's deemed confidential can run if they're considered non-classified. And so we view this as a simple administrative fix that would provide some equity across the board. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions to the best of my ability.
Thank you. Representative Filippi.
Hi, Mr. Senarini. Thanks for coming before us once again. And thank you, Mr. Chairman. My concerns echo Vice Chair Agello's, but I look at a different section. I look at lines 13 and 14 of page 1, and those say that a state elective officer may be appointed a classified employee or a member of the Personnel Appeal Board, but only after resigning their elective office. I just have concerns that runs afoul of our revolving door law that we have in the state, which I think requires a 1-year period after an elected officer serves before they're appointed to a position in state government.
I believe again that was definitive compromise legislation and language that had been drafted, because what the point was originally, I believe we had struck out all of subsection A. The way I read that is it allows someone to be appointed a classified employee or a member of the Personnel Appeal Board, but only after resigning his or her elective office. I still would say if there are revolving door provisions, those would still apply and those would still be in full force and effect. That language is simply to clarify, to make sure that it would allow the transfer if someone were to give up their elected position. It's not a flat statutory bar.
Representative Corvese.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have to agree with Whip Filippi regarding the language here. I think that if this bill were to pass this committee, I think you're going to have to firm up the language and specify that they're going to have a year. Okay, because to leave it like this is going to leave a quandary for the courts. It's going to end up in the courts. So let's not have a problem right off the bat. If this bill is going to take off and leave this committee, my suggestion would be spell it out that it has to be a year before they take the office. I think it runs afoul of the revolving door. But the question I really wanted to ask you was, what was the underlying etiology for the original language?
I believe.
If I can go right on top.
Representative Knight, let's let the witnesses answer Representative Corvese's question, and then we'll get
I believe that these prohibitions were what they originally were intended to do, was to mirror a lot of the prohibitions that were essentially contained in the Hatch Act, which primarily applied to federal employees and the ability to run for office. So I believe that a lot of that animus came from that type of information. But again, this legislation is not designed to undermine the Hatch Act. Classified state employees can run and can serve for elective office. Let me be very clear. They can serve for city councils. They can serve for school committees. It's just that if they decide to run for elective office, they are faced with a state elective office. They're faced with that they would have to resign to even go and get their signatures and put their name on the ballot, which we view as an inequity. And again, I would just point out this committee actually has taken dramatic action to restore voting rights and running to office for people who have done their time and served their time successfully under felonious nature. This is really the only prohibition that, to my knowledge, is still on the books.
Representative Knight.
Thank you, Chairman. Apologies. That was my same question. I was just going to throw in. I'm looking at the actual published version of the law. The last time it was touched is 1980. So that's your answer, right?
That was my answer. Yes, Representative.
Representative O'Grady.
Thank you. Senator Rini, you've said a couple times that your chief concern here is to provide some equity to the situation. Now, when Professor Rice, former Representative Rice, ran for office and won, he was not required to resign his position as a professor at URI.
No, neither was Professor Rodney Driver, nor was another deputy sheriff by the name of LaMountain, and that's where my historical knowledge kind of caps out. I'd have to go farther. But there have been individuals who have been in state service who actually have run and have served.
But my point is, if you're truly trying to provide equity, then why is this, as I read this proposal, although you could run as a classified employee, if you won, you'd have to resign. That's pretty clear from this language. If you're truly interested in equity, shouldn't you strike that provision as well?
If the committee wishes, and I've worked with the ACLU for a number of years, I know what their preference is, which is a flat across-the-board elimination, which is how this originally started. We had migrated the language as a good faith effort to assure the administration and try to find middle ground. So I was working to actually find a way to show that the sky would not fall. We could put this on the books. I doubt the floodgates are going to open. You all know how hard it is to run for elective office. But it would provide a chance to show that this would allow individuals to run and to make a choice at the point that it's relevant. Would I prefer a flat-out elimination? Yes. The answer is absolutely yes. I would never want someone like Representative Diaz to actually have the problem of being faced with, I have to resign my employment just to put my name on a ballot. That would be my preference. However, acknowledging that the Providence Journal, when the bill started to move, started putting full editorials in against the legislation, claiming the sky would fall and it would be the end of ethics in government, I moved to actually, and Grace Diaz and Senator Jabor were actually agreeable to try to draft a compromise that we had worked out with the Department of Administration.
Representative McEntee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Jim Cinerini. Could you explain to us what the difference is between classified, unclassified, and non-classified? What is the big difference with classified that makes it so that you can't, the reason why this bill was put in the first place?
Classified employees are those that have written job descriptions, generally tasks that require some kind of supervision, sometimes are repetitive in nature, but they can be also highly skilled, highly qualified. Essentially, the way the jobs break down is classified makes up the bulk of state service with many of your job classifications. But this General Assembly is created, and it's been acknowledged through the merit system law, that there are other types of employees that can be created. And so you set out in statute that there is a division of classified employees, and as I stated before, those largely revolve around secretarial in nature, but they can go to, it can include everything up to a Capitol Police officer, wetland biologist, any type of data entry operator. Any type of classification Council 94 represents can be included in the classified service. However, with the growth of service over time, there have also been additions and creations of jobs in the non-classified branch. Again, those generally work for the branch of the higher education and work at the colleges and universities. And then also you have unclassified, which are generally working for political appointees or the systems of the courts. But there can be conflicts because sometimes it can be very similar job descriptions that may exist in non-classified or the unclassified branch, but also exist in the classified. So it does create a double standard.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions? Representative Almeida.
Thank you. I don't know if I got a question or a statement, but I'll let you all figure that part out. Jim, Grace, how long have we been at this bill?
Since 2005.
So, Jim, we're looking
12 years.
And before that, actually, before the Senate version had moved, originally it had been an American Federation of Teachers bill with Representative Steve Anderson, who's no longer with us, and the bill had moved out to House floor, but had never been fully considered. It ended up being put back into committee. It has moved through the Senate twice. So I would say I took this bill over, but the bill has got history that predates me. I've been doing it since 2002. I'd probably add another 4 or 5 years onto that.
14 years of equality, that's what we're looking at?
I'd say about 14
years of equality.
Least, at a minimum.
And did you say Senator Jabor has put in something?
Yes, and his version is actually the one that has moved twice, yes.
It's over there now?
It has not been reintroduced as of yet. I need to talk to the senator, but I'm expecting he would put it back in.
Same language?
Yes.
14 years.
Well, the compromise language has only been in about 4 years.
Though, for equality. In other words,
the issue,
a white collar
14
force versus a blue collar. Well, that's what it comes down to. Yes.
Yes, it is.
Thank you.
Representative Price.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I'm all for equality and everything. And wouldn't it seems like that wouldn't it be a conflict of interest for any state or federal employee to hold an elective office? And it seems like the classified employee would have to terminate their employment to hold an office.
Well, that's what this legislation does.
Right.
Actually, they would, and so it removes whatever onus of conflict, I believe, would be anywhere applicable. But I would point out there is the class exception under the ethics rules. You have a vigorous ethics commission that I think this General Assembly just took action upon to restore the jurisdiction. I believe it was last year. And I must say...
This committee.
This committee. Let me give credit where credit's due. So what I would just say is you do have the process, and that ethics commission is designed to actually vet through different conflicts that may arise, whether you're a practicing attorney, whether you have business interests that deal with the state, whether you have anything. And I will tell you, with the vigorous press that we have, I would just posit to you that any public employee who tried to unduly use their influence for personal financial gain surely would be, in my opinion, would run afoul of that law and would be held accountable as such, just as any other member of this General Assembly would be.
Okay, any more questions for Mr. Cenorini before let's hear from Mr. Brown then.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. For the new members, my name is Stephen Brown. I'm Executive Director of the ACLU of Rhode Island. I'm here to express our organization's support for this bill. We do come from it as a matter of equity. Right now, the way the bill exists, we think it has it precisely backwards if anybody is concerned about politicization, and that's why we should have these restrictions. The politicization should concern, if there is one, which we don't think there is, should be with the unclassified employees, not the classified employees, because the way it works now is people who are in the policy-making positions, the policymaker at the Department of Health who's in an unclassified position can run, but as Mr. Cenorini said, the secretary, the custodian at the Department of Health, they can't run. And it seems to us that that's precisely the opposite of what the concern should be, and that's why we do support treating these individuals equally. And to address Representative O'Grady's point, and Mr. Cenorini mentioned this, we also have argued that it should go all the way. I understand this is a compromise. We support it as a compromise, but we believe that the classified employee who runs for office and wins should be in the same position as the unclassified and non-classified who right now are able to run, they're able to get elected, and they're able to stay at their employment. And we think the same should apply to the classified employees as well, for whom, as I said, we think any concerns are actually much less than for these other types of employees. So we hope that the committee will support the bill this year. I'll be glad to answer any questions.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Brown? Thank you very much. The committee does have written testimony from the ACLU in support of this bill, as well as Council 94. And with that, we will conclude the hearing on House Bill 5095 by Representative Diaz. I see Representative Lombardi is here. You have two bills before the committee, Representative. If you'd like, why don't you come up and tell us about both of those? One is House Bill 5011, and the other is House Bill 5036.
No one would ever believe that.
Shall we start with House Bill 5036?
Very good.
Is that okay? I just want to read something, and then it's very short. Then I'll do what I have to do. This bill would prohibit any lobbyist from making any political donation to any member of this General Assembly during the legislative session. This bill is about restoring the public's trust in its elected officials. People think we are beholden to special interests and lobbyists. By taking their money and donations out of the picture while we are voting on the people's business, I think this sends the right message to the voters and taxpayers that the only interests we are beholden to are the people of the state of Rhode Island and the people that we represent. The good thing about this, Mr. Chairman, is the lobbyists that I speak to said they're upset that it doesn't go far enough. they wish would be for the entire year. And you know what? They may have a good point, but I think it's a good jump-off point, a good starting point. I think as we see what's going on and what's going on in this country, I think this is a good way of saying, let's put the brakes on this. And again, what that means is, after session, you can have as many fundraisers as you want. It leaves the door open, so no one's saying, don't do it, you can't do it anymore. No one's saying that. So that's the spirit and intent of this bill, and I will endeavor to answer questions if I am able to. I'm probably not able, but I will try.
Thank you. Any questions for the sponsor? Thank you very much. Can we hear from Stephen Brown from the ACLU, please?
Thank you again, Chairman, members of the committee. The ACLU is here to express our opposition to this bill. You have written testimony from us, which we've also submitted in past years when this bill is submitted. Certainly understand the good intentions behind it, but we believe that even evil lobbyists have First Amendment rights, including the right to contribute to campaigns. Our testimony cites a federal appeals court decision that struck down a similar law in Connecticut. The other point I want to make in terms of the time frame, banning contributions during the legislative session, this was an exhibit I've brought in the last few years and forgot to bring it today. The state of Maryland has a similar law to Representative Lombardi's bill that essentially bans lobbyist contributions during the session of the legislature. And what I printed out a couple years ago was a list of all the fundraisers for legislative officials the week of something like January 1st to January 7th, which was right before the session started. And there were over 30 fundraisers taking place at that time. So I don't think you really solve anything by saying, well, we're going to ban any contributions during this time. It just squeezes it to another time, another location. But for the First Amendment concerns that we have, we oppose the bill and urge your rejection of it again this year. I'll be glad to answer any questions.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Brown? Thank you. As Mr. Brown said, the ACLU has submitted written testimony in addition, also opposed to that bill, and that will conclude testimony on House Bill 5036 by Representative Lombardi. Let's next take up Representative Lombardi's bill, House Bill 5011. Representative?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Again, let me just read a couple of sentences that I have prepared, and then I'll endeavor to try to explain what this is really about. The purpose of this legislation is to allow our representatives and senators enough time to legislate and serve their constituents rather than being forced to campaign every other year due to 2-year terms. This legislation would allow our legislators to focus on the will of the people and serving their best interests rather than running time-consuming campaigns so frequently. I'm sorry if I'm losing my voice, Mr. Chair. You've got to forgive me. I've had a long-standing bout with something in my throat. It's a frog, and I just can't grab it to give it a beating. But anyway. What this does, and this is based on what happened in Providence, what this would do is it would create 3 4-year terms. That doesn't prohibit you from running for senator, whatever. And I'm not even so sure it doesn't prohibit you from sitting 2 years out and then running for that seat again. But, or 4 years rather, than running for that seat again. But again, what this does is it gives people an opportunity. The way the system's set up now, there's just unwielding power. There's just no way to crack it, no way to get through. And I think what it does is some of the younger people that, or the newly elected people, I should say, that have been elected, this sort of at least help with their rise a little quicker. I mean, there's some interesting people that have been elected over the last couple of sessions that I think have a lot going for them, and I think have a lot to say, but because of the way the system is, it's going to take a little longer before that happens. We just got to hope that they don't get disillusioned and not run. But this would create new ideas, and again, it would stop that unwielding power that exists in the current system. And also, what it does is I think it levels the playing field with regard to co-equal branches of government. I will attempt to. The other thing I want to say, Mr. Chairman, is what's funny about this. This wouldn't take place till I think the year 2032, just in case for those people that are concerned about that. And the people that have given the most resistance to this are the people that have been in this room the longest, which to me it's unbelievable. And I say this here. If you're going to be in this seat for, let's say, 40 some odd years, power to you. But it's just something. I can assure you this. If I was starting this over again, I would not be here 25, 40 years. It's just not going to happen. So, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, any questions for Representative Lombardi? Representative Filippi.
Briefly, Chairman, I'm just curious as to why presidential election years were chosen. Usually presidential years suck all the oxygen out of the room, and people are focused on national and international issues as opposed to local issues. And I'm just curious if you give consideration to have this in gubernatorial years as opposed to presidential years.
Representative, just to let you know, since I've been in this chamber, I've submitted this legislation. It very rarely sees the light of day, and I can assure you that as long as I'm here, I'm going to continue to submit it. So wherever way it falls, believe me, there's no hidden agenda it has to. But if that's the way it has to be, that's okay. That's okay. It doesn't have to happen, in 2 years. It can happen in 4 years. It can happen in 6 years. That's the way we did it under City Council in Providence. I'll tell you what we did. It was passed in 2004. It became effective in 2011. Meaning 4 years, 4 years, 4 years. So what you're going to have after the next election in Providence, and not that I know anything about Providence, I know a couple of small things about Providence. Doc Covey is always left. But can you imagine that if things stay the way they are in 2022, 13 members cannot run again? It's an interesting thing. And you know what? The two people that are new, the new people, Councilwoman Ryan and Councilwoman Harris, they're moving up the ladder awfully quick. They've got a lot of say, a lot of sway in what happens in the City Council. And that's the way it should be, in my humble opinion. That's just my humble opinion. I mean, what do I know about geography? Nothing. Thank you, members of the board.
Any further questions for the sponsor? Thank you, Representative Lombardi. We have Stephen Brown from the ACLU once again, and Randall Rose. Mr. Brown.
Thank you. Last time today. I appreciate the opportunity. The ACLU has no position on the issue of whether terms for representatives and senators should be expanded. We do have concerns about the two-term limit that is contained in this particular piece of legislation. The ACLU has always believed in the need for a mechanism to ensure term limits, and that mechanism exists. It's called Election Day. We believe that is the way the voters should be able to decide whether somebody has served long enough. We don't think it's appropriate to set an arbitrary limit by constitutional amendment as to how long an individual should serve. Rather, let the voters decide, and for that reason, we oppose that provision of this bill. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Brown? Just to clarify, I don't think it would change your position, but it's 3 4-year terms the bill would create. Mr. Rose, welcome back to the committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. I'll be brief on this. My comment is only on the 4-year terms aspect of it, where I happen to unfortunately disagree with Representative Lombardi. I do think that 4-year terms are not a good idea. I know that having elections every 2 years is inconvenient for the general public as well as for the people running for office, but I don't think the situation will be improved if we have less frequent elections that would lead to the representatives being more out of touch with the people, in my opinion. I don't think it's something that would satisfy people who want to have more confidence in their representatives. And I think Rhode Island is one of a number of states that have 2-year terms for their representatives and senates, but very few states go as far as having 4-year terms for the lower house. Some have it for the upper house and not the lower, but very few states have it 4-year terms for their lower house. So we would be an outlier if this was passed. And so for those reasons, I would disagree with this bill. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm not sure what you mean by lower house, but any questions for Mr. Rose?
Got to be a better term for that.
Good point.
More numerous house.
As Mr. Brown said, we do have written testimony from the ACLU in partial opposition to this bill, and that will conclude testimony on House Bill 5011 by Representative Lombardi. Let's next take Representative Ackerman has been here waiting patiently. Let's take her resolution, House Resolution 5111.
Thank you, Chairman, and it's so nice to be back in Judd and see everybody. In regards to the House Resolution 5111. On Friday, December 23, 2016, U.S. representatives to the UN Security Council broke from decades of precedent by failing to veto Resolution 2334, which condemned all Israeli settlement activity as illegal under international law. The resolution failed to differentiate between settlements made on the 1967 security border in East Jerusalem and those deep in the West Bank, which are not authorized by the Israeli government. Furthermore, the UN resolution fails to pragmatically address the region's issues and encourage bilateral talks with its one-sided excoriation of Israel. Thus, I would like to express my opposition to the UN Security Council Resolution 2334 and reaffirm that the United States will continue to defend its ally Israel in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for the sponsor? Thank you. Representative Chippendale, did you want to testify on this bill?
Thank you, Chairman, honorable members of the Judiciary Committee. I stand in strong support of this bill, as I stand in strong support of the State of Israel. I agree with the very brief outline that was just given from the bill sponsor, Representative Ackerman. This is an issue that, in my opinion, would not have happened. The resolution would have been vetoed, as it had always been, were things not so politically upside down at the times. I think, unfortunately, there was undue political stress from every angle. I don't want to address the particular politics of it, but I do believe that this was a victim of politics, unfortunately. As our strongest ally and strongest friend in the region, Israel is an invaluable partner to the United States of America and to the state of Rhode Island. For us to turn our backs on the only stable ally we have in that region over, in my opinion, political reasons is a travesty. I think turning our backs on our best ally in that area was not well thought out. Nothing was gained from it, and much was lost. We do have to rebuild goodwill with Israel because of this. We will. This resolution is really quite simple. It's telling our Israeli allies that we stand with them. We don't necessarily agree with the actions that occurred last September, and we want to stand strongly with our ally. And that will conclude my testimony.
Thank you. Any questions for Representative Chippendale? Representative Corvese.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. No questions, Representative Chippendale, and I wholeheartedly agree with the resolution. I wholeheartedly agree with most of what you said, but I would only disagree on the fact that, politics aside, on the merits of what happened. Forget about anything that went on politically, okay? But within the absolute values of the resolution itself, the UN resolution, and this resolution, I think the Representative Ackerman is definitely on the correct side of this issue, and I think the statement has to be made. And remember, precedent has been set a number of times by the House of Representatives of Rhode Island. I'm a proud co-sponsor every year of of Chairman Kennedy's Taiwan resolution. We have a Armenian genocide, April 24th, that I used to prime sponsor every year until Representative Kazarian came here, and that's
outranked you.
She outranked me. Okay, so, but I'm sure we could get into a lot more detail with regard how important Israel is as our only ally in the Middle East.
Agreed.
And with things that will probably happen in the Middle East, the United States and Israel will be, it'll be important for each other to watch out for each other's interests and very existence.
I appreciate your comments, Representative Guisi.
Representative Almeida.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mia, this one's got me kind of talking. You know, I'm always with you on a lot of stuff. But I represent not a large, but a good-sized Jewish community. I'm losing my voice, so I apologize. I mean, I still do. Except for you. And I also have, back in 75, 76, 77, I served with, well, we called them Israeli Marines. And they were some really tough men. But they were Americans because of the dual citizenship that you could do, I guess, at the time. But anyway, now I look at this Palestine issue, and I'm looking at all the different maps, and I'm torn because for some of you that are new up here, no, I stand about human rights and civil rights, but this one's got me torn because of the fact that I, based on the religion, not by the title of Palestine, but by the Muslim religion, which I'm not, I'm Catholic. But the fact is that the whole Palestine issue, we have some of those folks in my side of town as well, be it the little bodegas or the stores, or the cabs, or whatever else, or the mechanic shops. And the way the U.S. is doing it now, and with great respect to you, my brother, we're talking about the current or past current politics, as it were. I'm down for Israel. But I'm not sure if I'm all the way down with this because I got a whole bunch of Jewish folks, good people, that are opposed to it. And in the black community, how we do things is, this way people think that all black people think alike. Well, we don't. But we go what this country is based on, the majority. And if the majority of the black people say, no, Joe, we don't want this, we ain't going that way, then we're not going that way. But that formula that I grew up in and speak very loudly on the floor, and some of you new folks are about to hear it, I have a large segment of the Jewish community saying, no, they're not for this. So I'm not sure if I'm talking through my head or through my heart. But the fact is, I got to make a decision based on the majority of Jewish people sitting in front of me on this piece of paper.
And I appreciate that as well, Rep. And I hope you understand how sensitive to the issues that you champion and you're so passionate about I am. And absolutely respect your opinion, your position on 100%. I think I would draw a little bit of just a divide in the analogy. I was trying to avoid the religious aspect of it. I didn't want to get into that.
That'd be hard for me in Southside, but you go ahead.
No, I completely understand. This is the key to this agreement is so that peace can hopefully one day be achieved in the Middle East. This isn't necessarily about a religious, and you talked about the different areas on the maps, and I don't want to get down to the minutia of what borders have expanded and what religions. I think that's irrelevant. I'm not looking at this for the Jewish people in my district. I'm looking at this as a representative of 14,000 Rhode Islanders and a person who's supporting the state of Israel. And I've certainly, Rep, as you have, I've had folks reach out to me and express discontent with this bill. I, of course, respect their position as well. But I think this is a bit different because we are talking about one of our strongest ally in a region of the world that is the most unstable. and I don't want to take or detract from what you said, because what you said was what you always say, and you're very consistent and very much on the point. I would ask that maybe you relook at it as more of a state issue, a country and the state of Israel working together.
At the ball, my friend. I don't want to do verbal table tennis, so I'll just serve the ball back to you. But this does have me concerned, and I'll let it go.
Understood.
Thank you. Do we have any further questions for Representative Chippendale, who is not the primary sponsor of this bill, but got put on the hot seat?
But you know I'll talk. So.
Absolutely, Representative. Could we hear from Patricia Fonts, Michael Mellion, and William Aldrich, please? You're up, Mr. Mellion.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I support the statements of Representative Ackerman and Representative Chippendale. The actions of our government in abstaining on the vote in the UN undermines and continues to undermine the possibility of bilateral negotiations for peace in the Middle East. I am a strong supporter of the State of Israel, and like every strong supporter of the State of Israel, we want to see peace in that region. A vote to pass this resolution will send a signal not only to the U.S. government, but to governments around the world, that the people of the state of Rhode Island support the concept of bilateral negotiations rather than having the UN or any other international body prejudge the issues. The only way peace will occur in the Middle East will be by agreement between the Israelis and the Palestinians. In my opinion, the actions of our government have undermined that possibility. That is why I'm urging you, on behalf of all who support peace in the Middle East, to pass this resolution and let the world know that the people of the state of Rhode Island, as well as the people of the United States, support the concept of bilateral negotiations between the parties who have to decide this issue and have to live together in peace.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Mellion? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Is Mr. Aldrich here? Come on up, Mr. Aldrich.
Push button to speak. I'm on. Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, my name is William Aldrich, and I am a resident of Warwick. While for over a decade, I have been chairperson of a United Methodist New England task force on Israel and the occupied territories, I am speaking today only for myself. I understand I don't have to register as a lobbyist if I do that. I want to thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak to you regarding H5111, a House resolution that opposes UN Security Council Resolution 2334 and strongly reaffirms bilateral negotiations between Israel and the Palestinians. I, too, am proud to say that I'm a strong supporter of Israel, but as anybody who reads the Bible know, there are times when the Israelites were called to task by God. I am not afraid to criticize Israel when I believe Israel is wrong. I urge you to oppose this bill because, in my opinion, direct negotiations cannot resolve the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. The reason is obvious. Israel believes that the longer peace is put off, the more land they will keep in any agreement, if indeed there ever is to be an agreement. What Israel is doing violates the Fourth Geneva Convention that prohibits a state from moving its own population onto occupied land. And it violates the UN Charter, which forbids member states from expanding their borders through the use of force. The contention that direct negotiations is futile is supported by what is now 50 years of failed negotiations between the parties and by positions taken by three critical Israeli leaders. First, David Ben-Gurion, considered the father of modern Israel, stated in 1938 that after Israel was created, they would abolish petition and expand into the whole of Palestine. Second, Ariel Sharon, the person on the back of this map card, has the quote that I'm giving you. He is regarded by one observer as the second most important person in modern Israel. He stated in reference to the occupied territories conquered in the 67 war that the Israelis would insert many strips of settlements between the Palestinians, quote, so that in 25 years' time, neither the United Nations nor the United States, nobody will be able to tear it apart. Third, Benjamin Netanyahu, the current prime minister, declared during his most recent election that there would never be a Palestinian state while he was in office. H5 111 encourages Israel to continue to flout international law and works against peace between Israelis and Palestinians. I urge you to reject it. Thank you. And I'd be delighted to take any questions.
Any questions for Mr. Aldrich? Yeah. Representative Almeida.
Can you repeat that again on the Geneva Convention again regarding this issue?
The fourth Geneva Convention, which deals with civilian populations, I believe, states that when a nation occupies land that is taken in a war or through military force or whatever, it has to operate in the interests of the population that it's just gotten control of. It cannot do whatever it wants. And one of the things it cannot do is move its own population onto that land. When I got involved in this issue in 2005, there were about, I believe, 400,000 settlers living in the occupied territory. That's 22% of historic Palestine. Israel itself occupies 78% of historic Palestine. What was the question?
You did it already. Thank you.
Did I? Okay.
You did good.
I read prepared remarks because I tend to wander. Now, today there's 650,000 to 800,000 settlers that are in this territory, and they keep on coming. They just announced more building in this area.
Thank you. Any further questions for Mr. Aldrich? Thank you, Mr. Aldrich. If you like, you can give your testimony to the clerk, and that will get distributed to the committee. That's up to you. Patricia Fonts from Occupy Providence and Jewish Voice for Peace had signed up in opposition to this bill. And our last witness is Mr. Rose, Randall Rose.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. I should say I do have relatives in Israel, and I'm aware that this is a very complex issue where people have many different positions, and there are many things that can be said on different sides of it. But I want to make people aware about some of the things that are relevant here. It's actually pretty rare for the Rhode Island General Assembly to issue resolutions on issues of foreign policy because, after all, that's not what the General Assembly is primarily here for. When we do pass resolutions on foreign policy, they're usually very uncontroversial, which cannot be said of this measure here. This resolution is designed to criticize the Obama administration. And I feel it's important to make that very clear. It's taking a position that's much closer to, say, Donald Trump's position than to the
Let's be going this far with this testimony.
Well, hang on, Representative.
Two administrations here. Why pick on them both?
Let him go.
All right.
Go ahead, Mr. Rose.
Yeah. So this is criticizing the Obama administration not for passing any vote for or against, but just for abstaining at the United Nations Security Council. So we'll have to decide who has more foresight on this issue, whether it was the Obama administration or the Trump-style policy. That's something that will have to be decided. But let me just go
again.
Mr. Rose.
I'll
right, hang on. Representative Almeida, I'll ask you not to interrupt the witness.
I can't help myself. I apologize.
Sorry.
Please do your best.
Sorry.
Mr. Rose, please continue. But I will point out that it's my understanding that both members of the Rhode Island congressional delegation voted in support of this resolution.
I will.
So you make bipartisan allegations, but that's worthy of being pointed out.
That it is worthy of being pointed out, and I understand the politics of this is complex, but yes.
That's right. So please continue with your testimony.
Yes.
And this is the Rhode Island House of Representatives.
I understand that. Thank you.
We're not at The Hague.
Yes.
We're not at the United Nations. We're not in Congress. So go ahead, Randall.
So when I read this resolution, resolution H5111 spends most of its time supporting the idea of a two-state solution based on negotiations, which is a policy that I also support, and it criticizes the resolution that the Obama administration allowed to pass at the United Nations. And when I look at the United Nations resolution, it too spends almost all of its time speaking about in favor of a two-state solution based on negotiations. So we have these. Both these resolutions are talking about the same final goal, a two-state resolution based on negotiations, and this measure now before us is criticizing the United Nations resolution. But the main underlying issue here is the issue that the United Nations resolution spoke about, which is the issue of Israeli settlements. Now, settlements are never actually mentioned in H5111, the resolution before you. I noticed that none of the advocates of this resolution mentioned the issue of settlements, but it's well known that the UN resolution was, although it dealt with a number of subjects, such as criticizing terrorism. The main new thing in it was criticizing Israeli settlements as an obstacle to a negotiated two-state solution. And even though the resolution before us, H5111, never mentions Israeli settlements, it does refer to the federal congressional resolution that Chairman Keeble mentioned, H-Res 11, which it takes a much stronger stance about Israeli settlements. So if this resolution is passed, we will be taking a position on Israeli settlements because this resolution says we staunchly support H-Res 11, so it's endorsing everything in H-Res 11. So let me just be clear. I'm glad that Bill Aldrich pointed out the fact that Israeli settlements are considered to violate the Geneva Convention. That's been a position of past American administrations. And although Representative Ackerman is correct that for the last few decades the United States has not allowed UN resolutions to pass about Israeli settlements, it did happen several decades ago that the United States allowed such a resolution to pass at the Security Council, and the Obama administration decided to do it again for what I think is good reasons. But all recent federal recent White Houses have considered the Israeli settlements to be a problem, including the Reagan administration has issued statements about it, because the settlements, being a violation of the Geneva Convention, are really an obstacle to negotiations taking place. I think negotiations will be great, but we have no negotiations going on now between the Israelis and Palestinians. There haven't been for a long time, and the reason, one of the main reasons, well, there are many, but one of the main reasons why there's no negotiations right now is because the ongoing settlement activity is a real obstacle to that. And many, as I said, many administrations have said that. And that's one reason why a number of Jewish people like myself are concerned about these settlements and are opposed to this kind of resolution. I'm reminded of a hearing last year that on issues related to Israel where Jewish people were testifying on both sides, and Representative Deborah Jadero said, well, it seems like younger Jewish people take a different position than older Jewish people, and I found that flattering because I counted as one of the younger ones. The reason why the Obama administration has allowed this resolution to pass is this is something the Obama administration had been discussing for months before. There were I remember stories about it half a year beforehand that they were considering allowing something to pass. And the reason was that that basically, although Israel is an important ally, they were showing a lot of disrespect to the United States. They disrespected our officials when they visited, and they weren't, and they were refusing to cooperate on some things that were important. And for that reason, when Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu came to address the U.S. Congress in a move to undermine the Obama administration, Representative Cicilline, who like me is Jewish, chose not to attend. And he's Jewish, he sides with Israel on a lot of things, but he realizes you can't allow an ally like Israel to take advantage of us all the time, because even though Israel is an important strategic ally, if you allow an important strategic ally to exploit their position with you and get away with things that undermine us as a nation and get us into more trouble, then they lose their value as a strategic ally. And that's what, in my view, has been happening in the Middle East, or part of what's been happening. And unfortunately, if we pass this resolution, then we will be in allowing the State of Israel to indulge its side of the relationship too much, and we will be interfering with reasonable efforts by the experienced foreign policy people in Washington to keep Israel in line. The resolution that passed in the UN did talk about, as I said, it was talking about a two-state negotiated solution, but it did reiterate a resolution passed by the Security Council before that these settlements are illegal, and it's necessary to do that from time to time. Now, I looked at other states to see if other states were considering this kind of resolution. I couldn't find it. I looked in New York, Massachusetts, California, even Texas, and other states. None of the states I mentioned are considering such a resolution. It's not very common. And even though I support Israel's existence as a state, that doesn't mean that I necessarily support their government's foreign policy positions against my own government's. And I can easily see the potential for the Israeli government's policy to lead our country into entanglements and disasters, particularly when they get support from our officials. I mean, it might have, before the Iraq War, it might have seemed appealing to some people to support resolutions that would call for harder lines against Iraq, but in retrospect, that kind of resolution would not have been a good idea and would not have shown a lot of foresight, and I feel the same way about this resolution. So for these reasons, I think we are better not getting into foreign policy and not passing this resolution. I'd be glad to answer questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Corvese.
I'll do my best to keep it brief. First of all, personally speaking, just for myself, I think this resolution is more than appropriate, should pass this committee beyond the floor. And when it's on the floor, It can be easily debated without bringing up the Obama administration or the Trump administration. As I said earlier to Representative Chippendale, based on the merits of the UN resolution, what happened to Israel, what happened in the UN, and this resolution, I think that the merits of the issue can be discussed without referencing Obama or Trump. That's number one. Number two, I certainly hope you're wrong about. I certainly hope that the observation about the younger Jewish members of the community and their view of Israel is not true, because you would hate to see Israel and its supporters being hoisted on their own petard. As far as and the final thing has to be said, there is no reason in the Middle East. Things that have occurred historically, within, geopolitically, religiously, that have been absolutely contrary to reason. But if there's a conflict, America's going to want Israel on their side. End of story. There is no other way to look at it. It's a question of absolute values. Yes, no, right, wrong. Do we want someone with us or don't we? When and if the Middle East erupts, we're going to want Israel on our side, because they're the only people we can trust there. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions from Mr. Rose? Representative O'Grady.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Not just, maybe not for Mr. Rose, but I will point out to Representative Corvese that if and when this bill does get to the floor, you can expect to hear from me not just mentioning the Trump and Obama administrations, but also mentioning the George H.W. Bush administrations, the George W. Bush administration, the Clinton administration, the Reagan administration, the Carter administration, the Ford administration, the Nixon administration, and the Johnson administration, all of which took positions against settlements in the West Bank. So I think that all of that history needs to be brought up, and if it involves naming names of presidents in the past, then so be it. I view this resolution as if this resolution opposes Security Council Resolution 2334, and not for the parts of it that advocate for a two-party solution, a two-party bilateral negotiations, then it can only be seen as rejecting the part that condemns Israel for continued settlements in the West Bank, contrary to Geneva Convention 4, Article 39. I don't think that I'm definitely not comfortable making such a vote, and apparently neither of the past 10 administrations, or however many I just named. I view that that history will have to come up should a vote be taken, and that's my observation on this. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Corvese.
Representative O'Grady, I respect your position on the issue. However, if you do want to get into previous administrations and their views and actions with regard to the Middle East on the floor of the House, I'll be happy to engage that conversation with you.
Okay, any other questions for Mr. Rose or comment by the committee? Okay, we have a bunch of written testimony. Sophie Soloway from Arch Street in Providence writes in strong opposition. Liz Tyler from Columbia Ave in Cranston also writes in opposition. I know Vice Chair Agello has a bunch of names. Before we get to that, I have a letter here from Sam Ackerman, who is a Rhode Island resident and a student at Columbia University, a former page in the House, and, of course, the son of Representative Ackerman, who writes, I write today in unwavering support of Resolution 5111. In the realm of national and international affairs, Rhode Island has always been a maverick. In the 1787 Constitutional Convention, Rhode Island was the only state to not send a delegate and refused to ratify the Constitution until it incorporated a Bill of Rights. On the dawn of the American Civil War, Rhode Island was the first state in the Union to mobilize troops under President Lincoln's request. This tradition is why Rhode Island must look beyond state affairs and follow the recent bipartisan actions taken by the U.S. Congress in condemning UN Security Council Resolution 2334. In a break from decades of precedent, the U.S. delegation to the UN failed to veto a one-sided resolution targeting Israel over the subject of settlements. This resolution fails to recognize that direct bilateral negotiations between Israel and the Palestinian Authority are the only effective way to achieve peace in the region. Rather, it unilaterally condemns Israel but fails to mention the Palestinian Authority's endorsement of acts of terror against Israel. Furthermore, it lacks nuance by condemning all settlements, when in reality a large portion of settlements are in Area C near the 1967 security border and in areas with sparse Arab populations. For these reasons, I believe it is necessary for Rhode Island to be a maverick in becoming the first state to condemn the UN's actions and to stand up for pragmatic solutions for achieving peace in the Middle East. Thank you for your time. Vice Chair Agello.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I will read a list of names of individuals from throughout Rhode Island who have called and spoken with our staff in opposition to House Bill 5111. Carol Marshall of Riverside, Rhode Island. Joey DeZilia, Lisa Bede of Pawtucket, Nama Gidron of Providence, Sheila Ressiger of Cranston, Deborah Lennon of Newport supports the federal bill 2334, but she says that Rhode Island should stay out of foreign policy. Maggie Bulmer of Middletown supports the Senate Bill 2334. Ruth Ben Artsy from Providence is a PC professor, and she is opposed to 5111. Mimi Budnick of the Jewish Voice for Peace of Providence is opposed to 5111. Sophie Solway of Providence is opposed to House Bill 5111, as is Lee Clasper Torch. Anne Lerer of Middletown, and Sarah Bernstein of Providence. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, and with that, we will conclude testimony on House Resolution 5111 by Representative Meir Ackerman. And let's next take up, I see Representative Phillips here, his resolution, House Resolution 5181. Representative Phillips.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Resolution number H5181, all it is doing is requesting we put on the ballot for the people's vote at the next election whether or not we would like to have the governor and the lieutenant governor run as a ticket or a team instead of individually. In my discussions with members of my community, they have asked, why don't we do it? The president, the vice president do it. Numerous other states do it, but not all states. So it's something that they wanted us to consider. There has been a bill in the Senate side for quite a few years asking for the same thing. So they asked me if I would put in a resolution to do the same.
Thank you. Any questions for Representative Phillips? Thank you very much, Representative. That will conclude testimony on House Resolution 5181, and that leaves us with our final bill of the evening, which is House Bill 5094 by Representative Corvese.
Mr. Chairman?
Representative Craven, would you like your votes recorded?
I would, thank you.
So ordered.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, I'll be very brief. This is a bill I've put in a number of times over the last few years. It's very simple, very to the point. I believe in '97, Governor Alman appointed Bernie Giacovone to be lieutenant governor. I forget under the circumstances what the circumstances were. Neither state statute nor the Constitution explicitly explained or described the mechanism by which a vacancy for the lieutenant governor would be filled. I believe someone took it to court, and the Supreme Court said that Lincoln Alman, because of the absence of any language, had the authority or the ability to make that appointment, but I believe recommended that the state legislature try to find a way to close that loophole. So all I did was I used the same language for filling a vacancy for the governor or secretary of state Attorney General or Treasurer by grand committee. That's what it is now for the other 4 state offices. That's what I suggested. And that's it.
Grand committee. We'll see who the lower house is then, right? Right, Representative Corvese?
But that's the way it is for the other 4 state offices, so I see no reason to make it different for Lieutenant Governor.
Yes. And I believe we have passed this or a similar version.
We've passed it. We've passed it at least 2 years. For some reason, there's a holdup in the Senate.
I can't imagine why.
Can't imagine why.
Are there any further questions for Representative Corvese? Thank you very much. That will conclude testimony on House Bill 5094. That is our final bill for the evening. Vice Chair Agello moves that we adjourn. That's seconded by Vice Chair McEntee. All in favor? Aye. Any opposition? We are adjourned.